This is Shutout Sessions with KyTheGoalie, and today's guest is one of the most respected names in lacrosse. He's the winningest coach in Stony Brook history, a 7-time Conference Coach of the Year, a national champion at Adelphi, and the currently 4th all-time in wins as a head coach in professional outdoor lacrosse. He also led the New York Lizards of MLL to a championship. The dude is a winner at every level. Now, he's the GM of the California Redwoods in the PLL. And he's also a dad of 4 D1 athletes, including one of the most talked about prospects in this year's PLO draft. Let's welcome Joe Spallina. How are you doing today?
My pleasure to be here. I'm doing great. Love your sweatshirt. And good to see you repping the colors there.
Yeah, it's nice. I don't think you can see it right here. I got my Syracuse banner. Got to rep the colors. All right. I wanted to start with the cool connection. My middle school coach this year, Coach John Layden, used to be the men's coach at Adelphi, and that's the college that you started one of the most dominant women's teams of all time. That's just amazing. What separated that team from other teams that aren't champions like they are?
So Coach Layden, I know really well. He was actually one of my coaches. He was the offensive coach when I was at Adelphi. He's an awesome guy. So make sure you wish him my best. He's one of one. He's a good
Hmm.
one. So just to make sure you don't believe any stories he tells you about me and my boys, when he was coaching us. So none of those are true. But our Delphi teams were great. I think they were built with grit and hard work, determination. It was also at a time when there were not as many Division I women's teams as there are now. Adelphi is a special place. I loved it as a player. We had some great teams there. It was Division I for my first 2 years there. We transitioned to Division II as the school had made the decision to move all the sports to Division II. And back then there was no transfer portal, so none of us knew any better. So we just stayed and we played a great schedule.
You've said before, anything short of a national championship is a failure. Where does that mindset come from?
Yeah, that's a mindset that I think you just have to have in general. What are you playing for if you're not trying to win it all? So, I think, for us, that was always the mindset. That's my mindset to this day with all the teams I coach, anything short of a championship. I said it every year with the Lizards when I was the head coach there, for as long as I was. And, I say it to this day with all my teams. We play to win the whole thing. There's no, I don't believe in participation trophies. That's just not something that I grew up in, and it's not something I raised my kids with. And I certainly don't coach my teams that way. So, you have to have a championship mindset before you can win a championship. And, you want to set that bar as high as possible. And I think generally when you have that bar set so high, you're going to find teams that are going to overachieve or meet the standard. If best is the standard, then you see a lot of players that are raised towards it. And, in order to get there, you got to have players with the right mindset. And, as a head coach in anything or leader in anything, you want to surround yourself with as many like-minded people as possible.
Amazing. What's the part of coaching that means the most to you?
I think the part of coaching that means the most to you, I think it's just the connections. I think, as a coach, you want to rally people and, you want to be able to connect. And I think there are differences. There's managers and then there's coaches. And managers are people that manage talent and just kind of, basically, and coaches to me are ones that reach for those connections, develop players, develop mindsets, make players do and achieve something that maybe they didn't think was possible. And I think ultimately it's just show belief in them. I mean, as a player, when you have a coach that has your back, you're gonna just do better. Right? It's sports. You're going to make mistakes. Nothing is perfect about sports, and it's being able to operate in the chaos. And I think that one of the biggest things for our athletes is knowing that you got somebody that believes in you. And it's really no different, now in the PLL and the pro level. You look at a guy like Dylan Malloy this year, somebody who I've known for a very, very long time, and was never really given a chance, in the PLL. Achieved great things in the MLL. Came over to the PLL and had a really hard time finding, I guess, a commitment to him like we were able to give. So he's somebody I knew, somebody I believed in, somebody we had really honest conversations with. And I think at the end of the day, when you know you have somebody that has your back, you're gonna play to who you are. You're not gonna worry about making a mistake. Oh my God, am I gonna get pulled? Am I gonna get yanked out? Um, you know that you have people who have your back. So um, I think those are all the things as coaches that you strive for. You want your players to know that you got their back. I think nowadays it's different. So I think your players have to know that you care about them first, and then you can coach them hard. Um, and there's really a delicate line there. So I think the connections are everything with coaching. I think there's players, that you coach through the years, and there's nothing better. A 2015 Lizard team, that group chat is still buzzing, with their likes of Rob Pennell and Paul Rabel, guys that I talk to all the time. Kyle Hartzell. Obviously my brother Brian was a legend on that team. Just so many great people, Greg Gurnley and Drew Adams, because I know, got to get my goalie love in there for you. But those guys are all great guys. And I think it's something where we have those connections and you achieve something great, you win, and those memories last a lifetime.
That's great to have a relationship with your players that go farther than just like 2 practices a week. So that's amazing that you have that relationship, even from that 2015 season, that you still keep in touch. That's amazing. Now that you're a lacrosse dad too, with your kids playing D1, has that changed the way you teach other people's kids?
Yeah, it does. Honestly, I've said this. I became a better coach when I became a father. I think it's, realizing that kids come home and there's the conversations around the dinner table, and I think you just realize, like, not every day is perfect. I think when you're a coach, you write things down, you think like that's the only thing on a kid's mind. And, for me as a father now, you realize that there's a lot of things going on with kids, whether it be whatever age they are, right? Whether it be driver ed or homework or, a girlfriend or whatever it is, like those things affect the performance on the field. And I think sometimes when you're not a father, maybe you lose a little bit of perspective with that. But when you come home to that every day, you realize, that those kind of things can be tricky. And, I think I probably have softened up a lot, just since I became a father. And, I think I was probably a little bit more of a tougher coach, and now I think you realize that you can do both. But the players, they better know you care about them first. So I just think those relationships matter most. I think those honest conversations matter most, especially, as I became a father, you realize, my kids, their strength is their weakness. Like, I'm their coach, I coach them, growing up throughout it. And now, they're coaches' kids. And, part of that is them, understanding, the way I did it and did it at a high level. And, they expect every coach to be like that. So there was a little adjustment with that, and them understanding that, not everybody is coaching, 365 at, 100 miles an hour all the time. I break down film with all my kids all the time. The amount of times, this afternoon, Joey they had Q's practice. He sent me a couple clips of things that he liked, that he wanted me to look at, and things he didn't like. And, um, made sure I study film with them all the time. And, same thing goes with my daughter. So, those are all good things and resources. I just try to be there for them.
You've got Joey, Brett, Jake, and Alexa. That's not just a family, that's a starting lineup. What's it like watching your kids compete? Not just as a coach, but as a dad. Do you stay calm or do you find yourself coaching from the stands?
I stay far away from everybody. When I go to the dome, I stay nestled in the corner, kind of by myself. I travel with the offense. I stay usually a step behind goal line extended in the corner. And I travel first and third quarter. I'm in one side, second and fourth quarter, I'm in the other side. Really cool connection I have with some of the Syracuse season ticket holders that have seats in those sections. They've become like a second family. They got my back, and they're it's really actually a fun connection I have with them. But it's hard. I tell my players all the time, make sure you love your parents. And I'm a coach through and through, so I try to stay by myself because I do talk during the game to myself and just kind of like, X's and O's stuff and things I see from up there. And I'm not very vocal at the games. I'll cheer when they do great, and I'll boo if it's a bad call. But I think for me, most of the time, I try to keep to myself. The camera seems to find me a lot in the dome, which is a little annoying at times. But I think that's one of the things. And for my daughter as well. Obviously, I'm a Division I coach on the women's side, so that's always a little bit trickier. And she's obviously an accomplished player and somebody who I try to be a mentor to her as best I can.
Joey, what's one thing about his game that people don't really think about?
Yeah, so the part of Joey's game that people aren't really aware, fully aware, maybe they are a little bit more now, is his ability to play off ball. I mean, I think everybody looks at him as being so ball dominant and such a great shooter, and he does all those things. But he grew up, playing up a couple years, travel, played with Brendan O'Neill and Andrew McAdory, for over 10 years, and he developed a great ability to play off ball. So I think you probably saw that really exposed in the Notre Dame game this year, where he made the great defensemen they have to operate a little bit more off ball, and Joey had a heck of a game. Next is Jake. Jake is something that people don't know, an underrated skill that he has. Jake was a top 10 face-off man, or FOGO, which they don't like to be called, but Jake was actually a FOSO. He's a face-off stay-on. So he played offense and defense all through the recruiting process with his face-off stick, and he was one of the top 10 rated face-off guys in his class, as in the class of 23, and something that he has not taken many. I don't think he's taken one yet at Syracuse, as he plays short stick D midi, and he's one of their starters there at that position. Brett was an LSM, and now he plays short stick, so he grew up playing short stick. So I think his superpower is the thing that people don't know is his ability to play with the short stick. So he just transitioned to that. So now that's going to be something that he'll see a ton of time this year, for those guys. And Alexa is a spitting image of Joey. I think their skill sets are very similar, and she has a great ability to play off ball as well. I mean, her and Joey both very ball dominant. They are replicas. One is obviously plays boys lacrosse, and one plays girls lacrosse.
All right, Coach. I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't ask this. We talked about this in Charlotte, and you've already talked about it on the Pelkey podcast, the burners. So, if I wouldn't be mad at all if you just maybe released a few names on the Shutout Sessions, but if you just want to maybe just say something about that real quick.
Yeah, here's what I'll tell you. The thing is, I grew up in an era where there was accountability. If you run your mouth on somebody, now people can hide behind fake names, unless you find out who the fake names are. So I think an interesting thing that we did, we're able to find out, is a few of those burners were operated by players on teams, on players that were competed against certain people that they were running their mouth on, guys that we talk a lot about, Brendan O'Neill or Joey, and so it was interesting to be able to find out who those players were. So now knowledge is power. So instead of throwing them completely under the bus, I like to know that I can control them in a sense where, like, I'm not sure many people's bosses or current players, head coaches, would like if their players are running burner accounts, running their mouths about players. So, I think the burners are great. Listen, I think publicity and people talking about people means you're relevant. There wouldn't be burners or people talking about people if they were bad players. So I think the biggest thing is those guys are players that people like to talk about because they're, number one, they're from Long Island, and number two, they're really good players that people like to criticize, whether they put their right shoe on or the left shoe on first. And I think every movement those guys have make is always under the gun. So I think they look at it. They probably take it a lot better than I know their moms, and take some of the criticism.
So, what do you tell your kids when they're talking about this, like to block out the noise from the people online that are hiding behind the computer screen?
Well, I think you tell them exactly what, like I said, people wouldn't be talking about them if they were bad players. I think people like to pile on, and when things are bad, or they like to be ultra critical of certain players, whether but they also get quiet when those players are having a lot of success. So, I think the biggest thing is you can't control what people say. You can control what they see. So I think that's something we talk about, and just go out and play. And you play for your teammates. Like my kids grew up in a household where I was their coach. I've had a little bit of success as a head coach. You play for your teammates, and you start worrying about things that are outside of your team, and bad things happen. So uh, I think it's just about being a great teammate, playing hard, having success based on your, and leaving no doubt, as far as your preparation, your mental state, and just kind of, and Joey went through it. His first game of his career, college game of his career, had 1 goal on 14 shots, and everybody wanted, to piling on that he was the biggest bust of all time, and in the next 2 games against Albany, I think Albany had 5, and the next game he had 5, and he's on track right now. He just crossed 200 points. He's on track to being he is already one of the highest point scorers in the history of Syracuse lacrosse, who's had a couple pretty good players to come through there.
That's amazing. What's one lesson that that you want to teach your kids that hope you stay with them, not just about lacrosse, but in life?
Yeah, it's the work ethic, and that's a great lesson for I think a lot of people. It's just, like it's a matter of, what you put in is what you get out. And, I think one of the things that my kids do really well, and I try to get with a lot of the kids I coach, period, is approach every practice, approach every workout like you're the worst player on the team, and you have to work, and you got to be a tryhard. It's people like to make fun of the tryhards in phys ed class and whatnot, and I always say, like, my kid, you have to be a tryhard if you want to overachieve and you want to succeed in anything. You have to go above and beyond, with your work ethic and your desire to be great. And sometimes that's doing the unpopular thing. Sometimes that's, it's sacrificing a Friday night to make sure that you get your conditioning in, and just you really, those are the things, those intangibles, that you want to make sure that you have an unmatched work ethic. So, we talk about practice like have the mentality that you're the best player, but approach practice like you have to be the hardest working player on the field. And I think any team that I've ever been around, the best players have always been the hardest workers. My boys come home from college, and it doesn't matter. They're 5 a.m. They're at the gym. They open it. They leave the house at 4:45. They're at the gym as the door opens. They lift, and they go to their speed coach. And they come home. They eat, and then they go up and shoot. And it's repetitive. It's every day. So those are things that people don't see, which is really what makes those guys. Every player. Those guys just all have a little bit different mentality.
All right, Coach, let's talk a little bit more about PLL and Redwoods, as you are the general manager of the Redwoods. What's the biggest difference of being the general manager of a team and not coaching them?
Well, it can be tough sometimes. I think it's, like Bill Parcells used to say, I like to, if I'm going to cook the meal, I'm going to shop for the groceries. It's a little different now. I'm shopping for the groceries, and my coaching staff gets to cook the meal. So it is different. I think it's sometimes fortunate to have a great staff that we were able to hire. Those guys do a phenomenal job, and they certainly ask my input on a lot of things. Just obviously, as you stated earlier, just I've coached pro lacrosse a long time. I've had a lot of success, in that. So I think I try to be a little bit more of a mentor. Coach Kelly has had a great coaching playing career, and this is obviously I think he's favored to be the coach of the year this year. And I've tried to be there to support him, and as far as like just little things that maybe you don't realize, and situational stuff where you're scratching a guy maybe out of the lineup and trying to keep that guy mentally, in a good place so that he's able to rebound when his number gets called again. I think Aiden Denenza was a great example of that this year. Got off to a good start and sat for 4 or 5 games. and then came back, and he was an incredible player down the stretch. So I think those are the things that that we try to do, and I just try to be good mentors and just give them a lot of my history and my experience and some of the wisdom that I could do from there.
Hey, so people call you Trader Joe for a good reason. What's your strategy heading into the PLO draft?
I think when you go into the draft, I think you got to obviously your due diligence. I think anyone off the streets could probably, be able to operate or have a good idea of what the first round talent is. I think when you want to be thorough in these drafts, you want to make sure that you're able to know where the next layer of players are, where some players that maybe the fans may not realize how good of pros they'll be. Um, what kind of college competition were they in? Were they in a conference that was constantly challenging them? Were they in a conference that was filled with players of similar PLL caliber type athletes? Or is a player in a lower conference, but we're really at a high level and their game translates really well to the pro game? So I think those are the things that you look at. You want to be super thorough. There are a lot of players, believe it or not, that are better pros than actual college players. And there's some players that are great at both, and it just takes a little bit of adjustment, as they make that transition. So I think it's about being thorough, doing your research, knowing the style of play, what it takes to be a good pro. I also think you want to look into what their profession's going to be after they graduate. Are they able to dedicate themselves to their fitness, and being prepared, to compete at the PLL level?
All right, so let's talk about it. The Archers have the #1 pick, and personally, I hope they take Joey. Are you going to do anything you can to get Joey in green and get him away from the orange?
I think Joey's got a skill set that makes him he's gonna be a really, really great pro for a long, long time. He's dedicated to the sport. He's wants to be a pro lacrosse player. With the NLL and the PLL. I think he can do a lot of different things. So I think Joey would be a layup for the Archers at one. And just the fact that he's not just a one-trick pony. And I think that's, when you have players there, you can plug into a system to do multiple things. I think that obviously makes a ton of sense. So, for them, and, I think there's a lot of really good players in this draft. It's interesting because this is an age group of the draft eligible players that I was fortunate to coach club with Team 91. Some of those players that are on my team, some players that we coached against. So I do have a really good idea of the depth in this draft. And just some of the players that maybe are a little bit under the radar. I think. As far as getting to answering your question, as far as what the Redwood draft plans are, our draft plans are always to try to get the best players. I do not probably anticipate him being there when we pick at 6. So, it'll be, I'm sure, a very interesting draft process.
What are you looking for in free agency?
I think you want to look at players that, number one, obviously fit need. We have a bunch of free agents. We've been negotiating with some of them as we speak. We actually have a Redwood call tonight after with our coaching staff to kind of go through some of our free agents. I think you want to look at that. I also think you want to look at now as players, are there players that are what are they doing outside of lacrosse? Are they working on Wall Street where it's hard for them to get their work in every week as far as if conditioning, stuff like that? Are they working on Wall Street and they are able to do all that? I think it's a lot of that kind of stuff. Are there any players that maybe fit multiple roles? Is there a player that plays long pole but also could pick up a shorty and give you some run there? Are there players that play attack or mid? So I think it's really, you have your core of your team and what fits there. And now it's a matter of, okay, where do we need improvement? When we sit down with the Redwoods at the end of the year, obviously our core, we feel really good about our core. I think we also know that, we didn't win it all. So we have areas that we certainly need to improve upon if we want to make that next step. Because it's easy to go from the second overall pick in the draft to get to the Final Four. It's a lot tougher to go from the Final Four to a championship. So we're going to do our due diligence and really look to continue to improve this roster. A year ago, we were not probably the best a franchise that people wanted to watch, and I think by the end of the season, with Chris Cav or our rookie class, really, I thought spurred a lot of energy in the PLO and to our franchise. I think California now is a fun group to watch with Cav and McAdory and Tenenza and JB and a lot of those young guys, and what they bring to the table. Obviously, Dylan Malloy's resurgence. So we were able to add a lot of first-year Redwoods that made tremendous impacts.
How close do you think this Redwoods team is to winning a championship?
Yeah, we're right there. I think it's a situation where we ran into a hot outlaw team. They found themselves, and they did a really good job there. I think we know the areas we have to improve. I think to some degree, I don't think we're far. I think it's continue to add high level pieces, and continue to make that surge towards the top. Our young guys, we had a lot of guys. We were really young. I think we only had one guy in our team that was even married. So like our team was a bunch of young college guys right out of college, and guys that are going to continue to grow, at the pro level.
When you look back at your career, what's one moment that you're most proud of?
I would think, I've been really fortunate being around this for a long time. I think you look back at that 2015 championship, we made that monster trade in the offseason to get Paul Rabel from Boston. We had so many great players, and the whole league wanted us to lose because we had, we had so many incredible pieces, and we stuck together. We were able to do it. For me, selfishly, I had my brother on the team. It was able to win a championship with him was really cool, and to have our families there. So I think that was a moment there when we finally, the Lizards had been so close for so long, and we made that final surge and to win that championship, beating the Rochester Rattlers, which is now the Denver Outlaws. It was Sudo was the head coach of the Rats, and now he's there. So Sudo and I had a lot of battles, and we were fortunate in 15 to get the best of them there.
You made such a huge impact on the sport as a coach, a GM, and a dad. What would you give advice to a kid like me that wants to do what you've done to the sport?
Be where your feet are. And I know that sounds really simple, but be where your feet are. Don't worry about, tomorrow. Just make sure you crush where you are. If it's for me, I remember being being an elementary school physical education teacher and coaching middle school. And, while my dream was at that time was to be the boys varsity lacrosse coach, at Rocky Point High School on Long Island. And everywhere I went, I just made sure that I gave everything I had to where I was. And to this day, that's something I try to instill in my kids. And, it's an old saying that you're looking at the mountain, you trip over the molehill. So, you want to make sure that you're focused on what's right in front of you, dominating where your feet are. And the future takes care of it. People notice hard work. People notice success. And, the man at the top of the mountain didn't fall there, right? So I think that's the lesson there where you just you work and earn and stick to who you are, right? And don't change and deviate from who you are to be the best version of yourself and to make sure you raise the level of the people around you. And I think people notice that. It resonates, and that's the best advice I could give somebody is, be good to people, treat people the right way. Hold them accountable, though, for sure, and that doesn't always go over well. But I think the biggest thing is making sure that all those pieces check.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast. Where can people find you online?
All right, my Twitter and my Instagram are both the same. It's not Twitter anymore, right? It's X, but at Joe Spallina. So it's at JoeSpallina. Those are both of my my handles there. I'm not a big Snapchat guy and those other things. It's too much for an old guy like myself. But that's where I am, and I want to tell you that your personality is electric. You're crushing it, and you're the man. And if there's ever anything I could do to help you, I'm always here for you.
Thank you so much for being on the podcast. See you next episode, and this is KyTheGoalie out.